Hi, welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. This is Laura Heywood, and you may be wondering why you're not hearing the normal today Laura Heywood Interviews sound effect. And the reason is that while I do have an incredible guest coming up, before I go into the official intro, I wanted to take a minute and discuss and celebrate the life of Hal Prince. I am live on the radio right now. It is Wednesday, July 31st at noon, literally minutes before showtime. The news came across, as they say, the wires. We got the tweets and the posts on the internet confirming that Hal Prince has in fact passed away. I know a lot of you listen to this show on the podcast, which means you may be getting this a week later. Subscribers through dnrstudios.com/Laura can listen live and get it for exclusively for a week. So if this news sounds like it's a week old, that is why. The free version of the podcast gets released after a week. But I feel really sad and just sort of bowled over by this news. I mean, he was 91 years old. He lived an incredible life. We don't have a cause of death as of this airing, but I have every reason to believe that he just used up every little bit of life left in him. He was so beloved and so accomplished. And it just didn't feel right to go live on the air and have a conversation without acknowledging Hal Prince. Especially, I want to send my love to his wife, Judy, who he was married to for 56 years. He has a daughter named Daisy, who's been influential in the theater world, a son named Charles, and several grandchildren. And he has made such a huge contribution to Broadway that it's basically impossible to overstate it. He started in 1950 as an assistant stage manager. He then became a stage manager on Wonderful Town in 1953, moving on to becoming a co-producer the following year on The Pajama Game, and then Damn Yankees, and then West Side Story, and then another production of West Side Story. The number of shows that he was involved in is crazy, and he's actually won more Tony Awards than anybody else in history, 21 Tony Awards. You may have seen the show that celebrated his life in 2015, The Prince of Broadway. That album is out, so I recommend, if you want a sort of Hal Prince's greatest hits album, look that up. And all day today, all year, and I think for the rest of I don't know, is it too much to say the rest of the history of theater will be celebrating Hal Prince, because his legacy is basically impossible to overstate. I do want to keep the show positive and upbeat and enthusiastic and celebratory, as I always do. But I just couldn't ignore what was going on today. And I'm actually thrilled because I'm doing something a little bit new on the show today with the help of a very good friend of mine. And while it certainly wasn't planned this way, I think that it's a beautiful way to celebrate Hal Prince, someone who was never on stage himself, but who nevertheless changed the world of Broadway and theater in general forever. So now let's start the show.
On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews
Dominic Grijalva, graphic designer, and so much more. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood, and today is a special day because I'm introducing a brand new segment to LHI, the Behind the Scenes series. Starting today and on a regular basis moving forward, in addition to interviewing performers and other public figures, I'll invite people to the studio who fascinate me personally and professionally, who you might never have heard of, and who might not even have jobs you've ever considered. Dominic, my guinea pig for this new series, is a remarkable dude. First of all, he's an incredible artist. You've surely seen his plethora of designs for TeeRico, which is Lin-Manuel Miranda's personalized, family-based, philanthropic merchandise line. Dom's other graphic design work extends to logos and advertising for many reputable regional theaters for shows including Carrie, Heathers, Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, Rock of Ages, Dogfight, Into the Woods, In the Heights, and many more. He's also a projection designer, having worked on regional productions of Disney's The Little Mermaid, Les Miserables, and even an Australian production of Phantom of the Opera. He's designed book covers and album art and award-winning animations. Plus, he holds a day job as design manager of Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, which actually represented Mr. Hal Prince. There's so much to learn from this one amazing human being about his unique role in the theatrical landscape and one of many ways that you can work in theater even if you're not on or even backstage. I can't think of anyone better to help me kick off the new Laura Heywood Interviews behind the scenes series. Welcome, my friend, Dom Grijalva. Hi, buddy.
Hey, Laura.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that awesome introduction.
I mean, all I did was read facts. It's a sad day, but I think it's also a day that we can celebrate all of the variety of ways that theater, or all of the variety of jobs that one can have to make theater.
Absolutely.
And, Hal Prince is such a beautiful example of, sort of pulling himself up by the bootstraps, getting his foot in the door, and
making opportunity for himself.
And for so many other people around him. I know that you are a performer in addition to all of these things that I just read. And, but while you have, you moved to New York, you're auditioning here and there, but you didn't just, like, you have this other passion and it's this other skill set, and you have found an intersection of working on your art and working in the theatrical space that's allowed you to be a full-time artist. And I think so often people think, well, I'm either in a Broadway show or I'm waiting tables, and there's no in between. And if you're not performing full-time, then there's no way to either work in the industry or really consider yourself an artist. And I'm excited about the behind the scenes series because it's an opportunity to talk to people like you who are doing so many fun, cool things within the space.
Awesome.
Talk to me about your love of theater and where it started.
Well, I never got into, I came into the game really late. I started doing theater in high school. I had like growing up, I was always really into watching musicals, but I never thought that I could be a part of one until when I was a freshman in high school. We did Little Shop of Horrors.
This is Fresno, California?
This is in Selma, California.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from the Fresno County, but my actual hometown is Selma, California, which is about 20 minutes south of Fresno.
And I'm from not too far from there, but I've never even heard of Selma except for like all the gorgeous work you've done for the regional theater there.
Yeah, Raisin Capital of the World. That's
Raisin Capital?
That's the sign that you read as you come in.
Hilarious.
I know, right? Yeah, Selma Bears, Selma High School. Whoop, whoop. Anyway, so they were doing a production of Little Shop of Horrors, and I had never even considered auditioning to be in musical theater. I just didn't think that was something that I was going to be doing. But I had always really been into choir. Like, I've been singing since before I could talk.
Wow.
And so the choir director also had a hand in the musical and said to me, you should think about auditioning. And I said, okay, why not? So I did, and I got to play, the guy that's, he's like 3 roles. He's like Skip Snip, and he basically is in the Meek Shall Inherit number, and he's like convincing Seymour to like sign away his life so they can mass produce the plants and all that. And I had a blast, and I thought this is really fun. So I started doing community theater. I kept doing shows in high school, and the love just sort of evolved from there. And at the same time, I was also getting really into all of my art related projects in school. In
Physical,
more of my
2D art, like...
Yes, in more of my academic classes. So, like, I remember there was this history project that we had to do and get creative with. We had to do, like, an alphabet book about some historical event, and I chose the Holocaust. And
what does that mean, an alphabet book? Like,
so,
A is for...
Exactly, and A is for
Auschwitz?
Yeah.
Jeez, that is
so
dark.
Kind of a dark topic, but I was able to... so, basically, we had to make each page, a representative of one of the letters of the alphabet, and I got really into it, and I started doing these interesting layouts, and I was really just like playing with this program on my computer. I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but I was like, oh, let me do something that's just not just text on paper, something that's a little bit more interesting to look at.
Was this for a history class
This
or
was
for
for
an
a
art
history
class?
class.
Oh, wow,
yes.
cool.
This is where my brain goes. Every time I'm told to do something that might be in a box, I'm like, oh, that's boring. How can I make it a little bit more interesting for me? And so that was the inspiration behind that. And my teacher ended up keeping the project. And like years later, I went back and visited my high school, and he was like, I still have that project, and I still use it as an example.
Have you looked into publishing it?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, maybe if I did like a refresh of it, because I was like 15 years old at the time, and like I said, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no actual like sense of design aesthetic and, you know, those principles of design that we talk about.
Yeah, but that's what makes it so cool is like when you don't know the rules, you don't know when you're breaking them.
That's
and
very
you end
true.
up inventing your own rules. You know, so many great companies and
Totally.
artistic aesthetics have happened that way.
Absolutely.
I also think like there's something. I mean, obviously, the Holocaust is about as dark a subject as you can get, and the whole A is for alphabet book style is so associated with little kids.
I know, it's
that
kind of a
it might feel a
contradiction.
little distasteful to like try to publish that. Like, who's the audience? At the same time, I don't know. There is this. Have you seen this new book? A is for Audra.
Yes, I am so excited.
I
about
actually
it.
just got a galley, which is what they call like a pre-published. It almost looks like really high quality color copies of all the pages. There's no binding, there's no cover, but it shows the whole book on loose sheets of paper, and it's gorgeous. And I'm actually going to have the authors in here, and that one is definitely for kids.
Oh, I totally have to tune in for that.
I
then.
think that the book doesn't come out until this winter, so it won't be for a while. But yeah, if you love musical theater divas, and especially if you have a little one in your life who's learning the alphabet, and you also want them to learn that B is for Barbara, that's Barbara Streisand and Barbara Cook. I hope that's not a spoiler that I'm giving out who the B is, but anyway, that I digress. So you were creating art for non-art classes, and you were doing theater and singing in your spare time.
And those were kind of the seeds of both of my passions sort of coming out. And it wouldn't have been until I was well into my college career that I decided, well, because from that point on, I was doing performing all the time, like I said, in community theater and everything. But the design part of my life was sort of taking the back seat because I was so into performing. But then once I got into college and I had to think about, okay, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? The fun and zany side of me was like, oh, I want to be a performer. I want to do whatever I want. But like the realistic side of me was like, well, what if that doesn't work out? What else can I do? And how can I maybe apply that to what I also love? And then I thought, oh, well, I really liked making all of these creative projects in school. Maybe there's like a career for that. And that's when I discovered the design department at the college that I was
Where did you
attending
go?
at Fresno State.
Got it.
Yeah.
So my association with you in Fresno is not totally unfounded.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really easy to make that. that
Yeah, so you
connection.
went to college in Fresno. Speaking of A's for Audra, that's Audra's hometown.
Yes, it
I feel
is.
like in New York, if you're from California, you're either like from San Francisco or from LA, and Fresno is closer to San Francisco, so maybe you'd be like, oh yeah, Bay Area.
Yeah.
But you could also just be like, I'm from the same town as Audra, yo. So
Yeah, it is. It's really fun to say that, just, you know, to let everybody know that, you know, there is a lot of goodness that will come out of that county. I mean, Audra's from there. Heidi Blinkenstaff is from there.
I think the two of them competed to play Annie.
You know, you may not be far off from the truth there.
No, I think they really did.
They probably did. I don't know for sure, but I believe you.
And I think neither of them got it when they were little girls.
I think it was, oh gosh, we
Or
have
did
to Google
Heidi?
this,
Maybe
but it was,
Heidi got it. I really should have done more research on this before just opening up a microphone and talking about it. But, you know, everyone who listens to Laura Heywood interviews on any kind of regular basis knows that I just show my true imperfect self. And sometimes I know half the story and sometimes I know the whole story. But it's just, we're just hanging out chatting. And when you're chatting with friends over coffee, you don't always know all the details.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
But they did get their start at a Good Company Players is the name of that theater company in Fresno, where they were both in the junior company, which is like this pre-show performance that'll be put on by children, and they were both in that when they were kids, and it's still going today. If you go to a show at Roger Rocca's Dinner Theater, right before the show, there will be the junior company performance and then the main stage show.
Roger Rocket's Dinner Theater.
Roger Rocca's.
Roger Rocca's.
Rockas.
Amazing. I feel
Yeah.
like I want to make a side trip to Fresno next time I'm
Oh,
home in
please
San
do.
Francisco.
Yeah, they do wonderful work there. I've also performed in quite a few productions over there in my time. It's a wonderful place, and they all love and adore Audra. And I think she's even.
I'm sure.
Well, of course, yeah. She's such a lovely human
I don't
being,
know
as
that
we all know.
anybody in any context could not adore her.
Yeah.
I mean, as a performer, obviously she's incomparable, and as a person, she's so lovely, and she's so active in, you know, equality issues, and so like, what's not to love?
If ever there was a perfect human, it'd probably be Audra.
I know, but I bet she's also perfectly imperfect too. You
Yeah.
know, like she seems so human. There are people who come across as so slick and polished and, you know, sort of like you kind of want to hate them because there's nothing to hate about them. And I feel like with Audra, she seems like a kind of person you could
so
just hang out with as like a real human being, flaws and all.
Absolutely.
So enough about her, more about you.
We could just talk about Audra all
I mean,
day.
I seriously could just do a full hour on Audra. Maybe at some point I'll get her in here.
I was just thinking that we absolutely should make that happen.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just, if you want to make that phone call, I've never.
Oh, I don't have Audra's phone number.
I know. I've never met Audra. I did see her on the street once, totally free of makeup, and she was so gorgeous. And I ended up tweeting about it, like, I just walked past Audra McDonald and she just looked amazing. And she tweeted me back and said, you know, like, oh, next time say hi.
That just happened with Kiara Hudes.
Oh, really?
The playwright of In the Heights. I saw her as she was walking onto the In the Heights set because I was getting a bagel in Inwood, and they happened to be filming in Inwood, right near the bagel place. And I'm walking onto the A. She comes out of the train, and I just am starstruck because I'm obsessed with everything she's ever written. I mean, between the Water by the Spoonful, and I just listened to Miss You Like Hell. Like, I am
so good.
astounded by the way that she can write the human experience from the Latin perspective as well. So anyway, I'm just like walking onto the train. She comes out, and I'm like, oh, that's Kiara Hudes.
Did you say anything?
I couldn't muster up the courage.
I feel like with a writer, it's so different because, you know, while she certainly is famous, especially now that In the Heights is getting the movie treatment, like, how often does a writer get recognized on the street? Whereas I feel like everywhere Audra goes, people are probably like, oh my gosh, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you. They recognize her, whereas I bet Kiara doesn't get it that much.
Well, maybe not. But I think I attribute it to myself. Like, because she is someone who is technically behind the scenes, you know, she's not the one on stage performing. So I kind of feel that connection with her because I would love to be like her. You know, I would love to be a successful person who is behind the scenes and maybe isn't always in the spotlight, but that's okay.
Guess what? You are. You are really successful. I mean, you may not be designing Broadway key art yet, but you're well on your way.
Someday. Yeah, I would love to. That's sort of a big dream of mine.
Can you actually define that term for people who don't know it? What
key
art is? Yeah.
So that's basically the main graphic that you're going to see on the poster or on the bus. You know, like a really good example to bring Hal back into the picture is the Phantom artwork. So you see the mask and the rose. Those are like the two iconic symbols that are basically present in any shape or form of marketing for Phantom of the Opera. Sometimes it's just the mask, maybe sometimes it's just the rose. But when you see it, you know exactly what it is.
Sometimes it has the name, like the Mean Girls key art has, it's Mean Girls in a certain font with a certain kind of, what would you call it? Like, not decoration, but
a layout.
Yeah, a certain layout, a certain font,
and other times it's more of just a symbol. I mean, sometimes for Hamilton, for example, not that they do very much marketing because they obviously don't have to,
right.
But the one Hamilton ad that I ever saw, and I can't remember where it was, but I was coming into town to see the show. It was simply the gold background on a billboard and the star with Lynn on the top.
Yeah.
And there was no mention of Hamilton. There was no mention of, to get tickets, call Ticketmaster,
right,
la 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 la, because they just don't need that.
And they also don't have any.
Yeah, right. At the time, yeah. And maybe even today, I'm sure they're still packing that house every single night.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think if you buy far enough in advance, you might be able to get tickets from the box office, but every time they go on sale, they sell out, and then, you know, and then the scalpers get on it.
Oh, boo.
Secondary ticket market.
I don't like them.
I actually remember when Hamilton first started on Broadway, or maybe right before, between the public run and the Broadway run, they did a takeover of Penn Station.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and there were billboards signage all over, including a staircase where they basically, let's say there were 20 steps going from Penn Station inside up to the street level, because Penn Station's sort of sunk in underneath. And it was as if they took a giant poster for the show, cut it into 20 horizontal strips, and put one on the front of each step.
So when you look at it from a certain angle, you get the full, complete picture.
Yeah, and I still to this day regret that I didn't go stand on the step where Lynn's feet, Lynn at the top of the star.
Yeah.
Because if from the right angle, I could have stood on that step, raised my finger in the air, and been, Lynn on the top of the star.
Oh, you totally should have done that.
I think I was like, I'll come back and do it again, but it just came and went so fast.
Yeah.
And then there was another time that they had a huge ad in, I want to say, Columbus Circle, where there were each letter of the name Hamilton was in one huge, panel across this giant hallway. So it would take you 10 minutes to walk from the H to the N.
That's so cool. This is the kind of stuff that I geek out about. As you're learning about me, I love walking through the subway platforms and stations and seeing big wicked takeovers. I think I saw Mean Girls takeover once, and I just think, ooh, somebody got to come up with that and envision what that was going to look like, because you're in essence you are trying to sell the show, you're trying to sell the experience, but you're also giving an experience in that moment as people are walking by to try and convince them to come to the show.
So many crazy versions of this, and I'm always like,
I love them
is that
all.
marketing? Is there an advertising team that does it? Speaking of Mean Girls, there's this iconic line from the film that's also in the Broadway show where they say, "Stop trying to make fetch happen."
Yeah.
There are hot dog stands in Times Square that have Mean Girls signs on them that say, "Stop trying to make ketchup happen." And I'm like, and they're real. It's not a spoof. It's a real Mean Girls ad.
I love that.
And I'm especially because I feel like New Yorkers are so what you don't put ketchup on a hot dog, you put mustard on a hot dog,
Yeah.
That and ketchup and fetch have similar sounds.
They
and
do.
I'm like, who thought of that, and give them a raise?
I love those unconventional types of things. I think one of the greatest things I have ever seen was when I was in Las Vegas, and this was probably 2005, when Avenue Q was playing, I think at the Luxor. And all of the cabs in Las Vegas that were promoting Avenue Q, all the little tops, where on the top of taxi cabs where they slide in the artwork, all of them had been covered in fuzz.
Orange
the puppet
fur.
texture, orange fur. And I was like, that is one of the most brilliant things I have ever seen. And it's also just so cute, and it totally catches your eye. I love when people do that.
It's probably
that's what
cheap
excites
too.
me as a
Orange
designer.
felt probably isn't that much more expensive.
Probably, yeah.
And then the iconic example is the Lion King logo, which I think everybody sort of thinks of as orange, but it actually was designed to be the exact yellow of New York City taxi cabs.
That's one of my favorite tidbits ever.
It was one of the first shows to advertise on the top of cabs, and at the time, I guess they wanted it to blend in with the cabs, so the cab seemed like one giant advertisement with a triangle logo at the top. Now I think designers want their ads to jump out away from the taxi.
That's what I get.
But if you ever see a Lion King logo, that's the color that New York taxis still are to this day.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
And it just so happens that it totally is in line with the aesthetic of the show. It is the color of a lion.
Yeah, exactly.
So it all
sort
just
of
happened
this
to work out.
orangish yellow. Yeah. Tom Schumacher told me about that. And actually, the interview in which he told me that, I just used as a replay. I dug it out of the archives and played it on my last radio show episode. So if people are listening now through the DNR app, they can get that Tom Schumacher interview and hear about that. And if you're listening on the podcast, then that one was released on the podcast a couple of days ago too. So
that'll be me right after this. I totally have to listen to that now.
Amazing. Well, that was just one tiny part of an hour-long interview we did about Lion King's 20th anniversary. But I remember tweeting that and you finding the receipts, because obviously when the president of Disney Theatricals tells you something, that's receipts enough. But you had some book on Broadway design.
It's Fraser by Design. Which is all about the designer who worked on the Lion King poster. It happened to be sitting to the left of me at my desk at work. And so when I got that tweet, I was like, oh, I know for a fact.
Fact-checking.
Yeah. I mean, not
What's
to go
his
against
name?
the word of
Fraser?
Tom Schumacher. Oh, my goodness.
It's something Fraser.
Something Fraser. The name is totally escaping me right now.
I'm going to Google it. That's okay.
You can take my designer card away from me.
No. This is the thing that... nobody's perfect. And one of the reasons that I was really excited about doing a live radio show as opposed to a heavily edited podcast is that I think sometimes stuff that like anybody or any art that is heavily edited loses some of its authenticity, and it can make it more I don't want to say threatening, but less accessible to somebody who dreams of making art themselves. And
There's
I
a
think,
humanness to that too.
yeah, I don't want to be seen as perfect. How scary, because there's so far to fall when somebody sees you as being without flaws. I'd rather just be like, take me or leave me, you know?
And I love that about you.
Thanks. I'm trying to be as open as I can. I'm realizing, like, I'm now in my 25th year of therapy, which, by the way, I highly recommend. But I'm also, it's like, man, there is always deeper to go.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to be even more authentic about, like, the dark times and the weirdness and the struggles, because, you know.
You can't have,
How
you
can
can't
you
have the light
inspire
without a little
people?
dark.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how can you inspire people to work on themselves if you present as someone who doesn't need any work?
Absolutely.
So anyway, so I believe that, you know, do you know how to spell Frasier?
Frazier, I believe.
That's what I thought. It's unfortunately Google
I'm
keeps
gonna
taking
Google
me
it.
to the sitcom,
Oh.
which is not even spelled spelled like that. But then there's also a home designer named Frasier. Oh wait, here. You know what? I'm not going to spend the radio show Googling stuff. If people are interested, they can figure it out.
I will find it by the
also,
end of the
if
day.
you can, when you get back to your desk, you can take a picture of the book.
Oh, there it
and
is.
then
I
we
will
can
do that.
tweet it.
Yes.
And then people can go and find it there.
It's a wonderful book, though.
I want to read it because I feel like I've read so many books about Broadway productions, but almost none about that side of it. And it sounds like that is the kind of book that inspired this segment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so your day job, which, by the way, huge thanks to them for letting you come spend an hour with me in the middle of your workday, especially on a day like today where there was breaking news that was very relevant.
Very relevant.
You
yeah.
work as design manager of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society. What is the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society?
Well, Laura, Stage Directors and Choreographers Society is the union that represents directors and choreographers all
So
across the nation.
It's like Actors Equity, except for directors and choreographers.
That's like the perfect way to summarize it.
Well,
yeah,
thanks.
it's the union. It's basically the equity for directors and choreographers.
There's something about the word society that makes it sound so grand. Like there's a clubhouse. Like I think of unions as being very like, you know, blue collar sort of.
Like we're in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah. And then
And Sally
like
Field is,
picket
like, leading the
lines
way.
But then I hear Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, and I picture like smoking jackets and big like upholstered chairs where, you know, Jerry Mitchell and, you know,
Right. Yeah, they just lounge around and talk about how wonderful they
like
are.
Lee Silverman goes in and is like, "Bring me my martini."
Oh, if only. I want to work there.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I think it has something to do with the union was founded in 1959, and it was then called the Society for Stage Directors and Choreographers. So I think society may be like a word just from that time period
from that
may
era.
mean something a little bit different now. You know?
yeah. Well, and I also think that society has multiple meanings. It
Right.
can mean, again, I have not like looked it up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, but you know, we think of society as meaning high society.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
But it couldn't be. It's definitely not that. No, it's a union where we all work really hard to represent all of our members and make sure that they're getting health coverage and being paid what they're owed. You know, for the good work that they do. And it's a really noble place to work.
I can
and
imagine.
a really, really wonderful group of people to work with. I mean, they let me come here in the middle of the workday.
Yeah,
so right
and they
there.
really could have. I mean, you're the one who shared the news with me that Hal Prince had passed away less than half an hour. We all got the news less than half an hour before we were supposed to be live.
Yeah.
And you still managed to get the word out because you run the social channels for
Correct.
the society, right? So you managed to get the post
I
out
did.
and still get here on time to go live with me.
I posted it right as I was walking over here on the way.
Well,
But that's the job.
yeah, I think anyone who works in social media has to be ready to go. I also
Absolutely.
think it's a real sign that they love you, because if there ever was a moment where they could have said, extenuating circumstances, you can't leave, and I would have understood it. I don't know what I would have done for an hour, but I probably could have managed to wax poetic about Hal Prince. I did spend a day with him once.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I just posted pictures of that day to Instagram and Twitter. He came to SiriusXM, my former employer, when he was promoting. Let's see, it was 2013. It may have been a book. I think it was a book. And he came in to do some interviews. And because I was in charge of theatrical guests across the entire platform, I was the one who had him sign his paperwork when he came in, and I got him, if he wanted coffee or water, I would have gotten him that. And then I took him from studio to studio to do all of the interviews.
Wow.
And he was lovely. He had his signature glasses, and we took a lovely picture together, and he couldn't have been kinder. So,
legend.
I know.
Absolute legend.
Just to have lived in the same era feels remarkable.
It does. Yeah, I was contemplating that on the way over here.
I'm also nervous because he's not the only legend we have who's in that age bracket. And, I feel like even though I tend not to be at all superstitious, things do seem to happen in threes. And I just want everybody else to hang on.
Oh, we don't have to talk about that.
I'm phrasing it as in the positive, just like, hang on, everybody, we need you.
Definitely.
Okay, let's slip away from the morbid, so I know that speaking of unions, for actors, and if you don't know this, because you're the design guy, not like the eligibility guy, so if it's outside your area of expertise, just say that. But I know for equity, somebody who does a school play is not in the union, that you earn points, and when you have a certain number of points based on the performances that you've done, then you join the union, because that's your profession is being an actor. It's not like a side thing that you do. Is the same true for the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society? Do you have to be directing or choreographing at a certain level or for a certain amount of time before you join?
I know that there is not a points system. However, that is definitely outside of my area of immediate expertise.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Of course. Nor would I want to put you in a position to. I just personally am curious.
Yeah, it does have to do with where you are working, at what level you are working, and after a certain amount of time, they will reach out and say, hey, are you interested in joining? We also have several meetings and events where we'll have our member services department, who are two of the greatest women I've ever known.
Yay!
They'll go out and talk about how great SDC is and why you should join, and we'll get prospective people to come and just scope us out, and if they're interested, they can apply, and there's a whole application process. But no, I don't believe there's a points system where you earn your way in that regard.
So what just occurred to me is that I know actors and stage managers are in the same union, which is why occasionally, if you read deep into the playbill, you'll occasionally see someone who's both an assistant stage manager and an understudy, because they are allowed to do the same, to cross over because they're in the same union.
That's interesting.
So it'll be a super emergency cover, and a lot of actors will get their starts by being associate stage managers because I don't know if it earns them points, but I don't even know how the point system works. That may be an outdated description of how Actors Equity works too. But I realized that people like Casey Nicola and Jerry Mitchell, who are both directors and choreographers, whereas you never see a director lighting designer combo. And I wonder if that has to do with the fact that the crossover is easy because they're already in the same union. Whereas if there was a separate directors union and a separate choreographers union, then they would have to sort of choose one or join both, and that might be complicated.
Maybe it's complicated, but I mean, in the case of Joel Gray, he is now a member of SDC, but he's also a member of Equity.
Right.
So I have to assume that there is a way to make those
more
worlds
than one union work.
blend.
Yeah, of course. I guess
but
there
that
are
is
a lot
fascinating.
of actor.
Now
Casey
I want to
Nicola is
know.
an actor,
Well,
too.
now I want to know if there are any director lighting designers.
Well, the closest thing that I can think of off the top of my head is someone like Julie Taymor, who, was the director and the puppet designer for Lion King.
Bless her.
She's my hero. In fact,
She's so cool.
1 year ago today, I had the biggest day of my life. No, 1 year ago yesterday, the biggest day of my life, because I interviewed Julie Taymor in the afternoon for the theatrical re-release of Across the Universe. And I did my senior thesis on Julie Taymor when I was in college
No
in the
way.
90s. No, I guess it was 2000. It was the year after Lion King debuted in the West End, where I was studying at the time. So she was the subject of my biggest project in college.
What a moment for you.
Oh my gosh, I know. And then in the evening, I interviewed Lin-Manuel Miranda and the cast of In the Heights at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, for Heights 10.
Yeah, for the 10th anniversary of In the Heights. So
I was totally
like,
there.
yeah, you were, and you had just moved here.
I had. That
I
was
remember-
literally days after.
Because this brings us to how we met, which was actually over Twitter.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had been in touch. We had Bay Area ties. We had at least one mutual friend who I also met over Twitter. And you were like, okay, I really want to come to this, but it'll be my first day at my new job, and I can't stand in line all day. It
wasn't the first day, but it was in the first week, so I was really apprehensive about getting time off on my first week.
Right, especially for a full day. I think it was something like you were going to have to ask on day one to have a whole day off later that week or something.
And Howard Sherman, who was my supervisor, he let me go because he's a sweetheart.
Well, and Howard Sherman, I think most people might know him best as the guy who took all the Ham for Ham videos.
Yes.
He was also the, like executive director of the American Theater Wing for a long
his
time.
resume is
and
ridiculous.
He's done a ton in terms of equality and parity in theater. But I think he's famous for being the guy who got all the front row videos
Who happened to be there.
of all those Ham for Ham shows. But In the Heights was how you and I really bonded and got to know each other. And it wasn't until after you got to New York that I realized that you were the guy who designed so many of the T-shirts and pins and towels and postcards and stuff at TeeRico.
Oh my God, a dream job.
So
let me just tell you.
Tell everybody who might have been living under a rock what TeeRico is.
So TeeRico is Lin-Manuel's family-run, family-owned merchandise site where there are tons of shirts and towels and pins, things that you just mentioned, all designed by either family members or fans, but they consider them honorable family.
Yeah.
Honorary family, excuse me. And how it basically came about, if that's what you'd like to know.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So it's kind of a crazy crazy story timeline. So I, as we all are, was totally obsessed with Hamilton when it came out, and I made some fan artwork, and it was this thing that I called the Dueler eye chart. And it's just this skinny little card thing.
Dueler being Dueler.
Correct.
Those who duel.
Those who duel. One who duels. And on it was one of the lyrics in the show, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story." And I laid out the typography, all the little letters, to look like one of those Snellen eye charts that you see when you go to the eye doctor. And
that has the E going in all the different directions.
All the different directions, and all the letters get smaller as you go down. And the kind of idea behind it was just I saw the timeline of Alexander Hamilton's life from top to bottom, and the letters getting smaller as you go down was sort of representative of how high the stakes got throughout his life, from when he arrived here to his eventual fatal shooting.
First you got to figure out who lives.
Yeah, first you got to figure out who lives, then you figure out who dies, and then hopefully someone tells your story
down
right
the line. Yeah.
And so there was also a reference to the 10 dual commandments, because there were 10 rows of letters. There's just all these little details, right? So I make this thing,
and this was just playing again.
Yeah,
with
this
an
was
app on your
totally
computer, or
fan
a
art
program. Yeah.
that I did instead of working on a school project, because I'm such a procrastinator. And I made it, and I sent it to a couple of friends, and I said, do you get this? First of all, can you read this?
They're like, I can only read who lives, who dies.
Yeah. And they all said, no, I think this is totally cool. And one of my good friends was like, you should send that to Lin-Manuel and to the cast of Hamilton, get a bunch of copies printed and just send it out, just as a fan gift. And who knows what'll happen? Maybe you'll get a thank you on Twitter. And so I did that.
What did you do? You had it printed out on cardstock
I
or
did,
something?
yeah. I went to one of those big printing websites. I can't remember the name of it exactly, and I had 50 copies of this little card printed.
How big was it?
It's like 4 by 11 inches, so fairly small.
But bigger than a postcard.
Bigger than a postcard, yeah. About the same width, but like maybe double the height.
Oh, got it. Yeah, because it goes down 10 rows. That makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, and I wanted it to be something different. I didn't want it to be a standard postcard. I wanted it to be something that would catch your eye, based, one, on the design, but also like just the sheer shape of it is a little unconventional. And so I sent it to them. I didn't hear anything back for a couple months. I did get one cast member to tweet at me and say thank you, and that alone was awesome. I can't remember the name of him.
Did you just send a packet of 50 to like the cast, or did you individually?
No, so I individually, or I put them all in individual envelopes and addressed a big package of them all to the stage door at the Rogers, and sent it off at the on-campus post office.
Yeah, this is when you were at Fresno State?
Yeah, this is when I was at Fresno State. This was 2016.
Choose your procrastination wisely, because you know what I did when I was procrastinating during my theater degree? I made radio. Like, what we think is our ignoring our homework is actually the real homework.
Is planting seeds for something else.
Yeah.
Like you never know. And I mean, look at you now, Laura. Look where we are now.
Look at me now.
Look at where you started.
The fact that I'm alive is a miracle.
So anyway, actually, I need to correct myself. That was winter of 2015. So then in like January 2016, I got a tweet from Lin-Manuel saying, "Hey, we all love this eye chart. Thank you so much." And I died. And then I came back to life because there was more to the story. And then March rolled around, and he sent out this tweet that I didn't initially see because I was asleep, because I was still in California, and it was 3 hours later. So I think it was like 10 a.m. New York time, but 7 a.m. my time, so I'm still asleep. And I start getting these text messages from a lot of friends, and I got tagged in things on Facebook, and everyone was like, "What does Lin want?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I open up my Twitter, and he had tweeted this thing, or he had tweeted that he wanted me to send him my email. But he meant to send it in a direct message.
But he ended up just
tweeting to all of his followers that were growing at such a fast rate that he needed to speak with me. And so naturally, everybody that I know was like, "What does he want?"
So you just got famous, like Twitter famous.
It was a very
you'd
crazy
even done
day.
Anything.
It was a bit of a day before a bit of a day was a thing.
Yeah. Did he end up deleting it? Did you at least get a screenshot of it?
Yes, somebody screenshot it, and that was how I learned what was even happening. They were like, "He tweeted this and then deleted it." I was like, "That's weird." So then I opened up my my Twitter, and I had a DM from him, and he was like, "I'm so sorry, I meant to direct message you, but somehow
please tweet my name out as often as you want."
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah. I could use the PR. That's cool.
I know. Like, please, no apology necessary.
But he said, "Can you send me your email? I have this idea, and I want your input on it." And I said, "Sure, you can ask me anything. Here's my email, here's my address, here's my phone number, here's the keys to my car. Like, what do you want?" And then like a couple days later, his brother-in-law, Luis Crespo, emailed me and said, "Hi, I'm Luis Crespo, and I represent Lin, and I handle all of his merchandising efforts. We're basically, we don't know what this is going to be called yet, but we want to do a merchandise store for Lin stuff, all based on his work and all with artwork created by fans. He loves your eye chart, and you were actually like one of the very first people that he thought of when we were coming up with this idea." He was like, we were talking in between shows at Hamilton, and he pointed to the eye chart hanging on the wall of his dressing room, was like, "I want that guy."
And you're like, wait, you just buried the lead.
Yeah.
My eye chart's on his dress.
Yeah, and I was like, "What?" And they said, "Would you be interested in being a part of whatever this is going to be?" And I said, "Absolutely." And from there, they were like, "Great, well, we want you to work specifically on a line of things based on In the Heights." And I said, "Absolutely," because In the Heights, I mean, that's everything to me. I remember, just a sidebar, I remember watching In the Heights on the Tony Awards telecast back in like 2008 and thinking, those people look like me, and I have never seen that before. And the work is actually so beautiful, and the music was so, it just spoke right to my heart. You know what I mean? Like, I had never seen representation that accurate and that positive ever. And so when I watched Lin-Manuel accept those Tony Awards, I was like, I have to work with that guy someday.
And you
it was like, yeah, I was Ariel on top of that rock. I was like, I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'm gonna work with Lin-Manuel. And here we were, almost 10 years
we
later.
have to cut that and like, there's an audio version of a GIF. I would want to.
Yeah. And so when the time came to talk about whatever this crazy cool merchandise store was going to be, I couldn't help but think back to that moment and think, oh my God, 16-year-old Dom would not believe this.
And you were still, what, only like 20 at the time?
Yeah, I was 20, I think 23 at the time.
So you then, did they give you any further instruction, or was it just like, listen to In the Heights a bunch of times and come up with some ideas?
They said that, but the gag is that I didn't need to.
Because you already knew it by heart.
I so did. I mean, I had actually just directed the show back in my hometown. It was my very first time directing a show, and of course
Selma?
I chose one of the biggest shows ever to do. Yeah, in Selma, at the Selma Art Center. Shout out to SAC.
Is that the one you also did the design of the posters for?
Yeah.
Because your website is absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
And when I was like, all right, so send me some bio stuff or whatever. We chatted on the phone for a few minutes yesterday, but you didn't even mention this website, which has like. It's gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
And even just the logo you've made for yourself, the D with the G embedded in it.
Don't you like that?
Oh my gosh, it's brilliant. It's like a perfect logo.
Thank you.
And
I love it too.
I had no idea that you designed book covers and album art and like all of those little animated. What are they called?
The GIFs.
Yeah.
Pop culture GIFs.
So you say GIFs, huh?
Well,
I'm definitely on team
it
GIF.
depends. I love saying GIF, but the website GIPHY, if you pronounce it Jiffy,
Yeah.
like that sounds like a pun. Like, oh, I'll be there in a jiffy. But if you pronounce it like Giffy, then it's like, what's a Giffy?
Yeah, but Jiffy is of peanut butter. When I hear Jiffy, I don't think be there in a jiffy. I think like, oh, sugar-filled like peanut butter.
Well, I'm a Skippy guy, so maybe I
Substitute.
just don't have the same connotation.
Maybe. I guess it's just Jif is the peanut butter. But anyway.
I accept both.
Yeah.
Some days I feel a little jiffy, other days I feel a little Giffy.
Yeah,
and that's
okay.
just how the cookie
well,
crumbles.
then we don't have to fight about it.
But anyway, where was I?
Oh, you were talking about how you just directed.
Oh,
In the
yes,
Heights,
I had. Okay.
And so you were like immediately like, I know, I'm making a Piragua shirt.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I'm just
That's
another
the one
quick
I own.
sidebar. Like I had never directed a show before, and so for that to be the first thing that I laid my little directorial hand on was such a pleasure, and also such a giant like mountain. I had no idea what I was doing. I was learning it as I went on, but it ended up being a beautiful experience. And anyway,
Was it also the first time that you both were involved on the artistic side and the behind the scenes side, because you did the graphic design and the directing?
Actually, that's so true. Yeah, because I had never been in the director's chair before, and I don't think up to that point I had ever also done the marketing and publicity while also being involved directly with the show. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of just a testament to who I've become, this like multi jack of all trades. Like my problem is I don't know how to say no. So when someone's like, hey, we need like a poster design, I'm like, oh, I'll do that. And I'm also directing the show, and I'll also be in the show, because I've never done that. That scares me.
Yeah.
Maybe someday, but not yet. But so they were like, okay, give us like a little list of a few different references and lyrics to In the Heights that you think you can make something out of. I ended up turning around the next day with over 100 ideas. And they were like, wow, okay, this is awesome. And I think they like met, and like Lynn went over all of them with Luis, and they narrowed it down to 7 from those 100, to like a little tiny list of 7. And they were like, okay, go. And so I just started sketching, and I started making drafts of things, and just sort of going to town, like letting my imagination run free, and also just getting to pour out so much love for this piece that I had developed over the years, from watching it to getting to work on it to seeing it to being like, I'm going to get to make these things that are going to express just how much this show means to me, and that I know somewhere out there means so much to somebody else.
Totally. So the one that I'm most familiar with from that original collection was the Piragua shirt, which is it almost looks like a rainbow. It's like a little box with each flavor.
It makes me think of the Spice Girls for some weird reason.
Like their bar logo. To me, it reminds me a little bit of like an elongated pride flag.
That
I know
too.
They're not in rainbow order.
Just like
but
very colorful visuals.
Yeah.
It calls me back to those. So things like the pride flag, things like any sort of flag, like it's very much the idea behind each Piragua square And it didn't work out this way, but my first initial concept for it was making the cup like the main color of a flag of a Hispanic country.
Oh, wow.
So like I think I made Mermaid like Argentinian flag blue, and then the background was white, and the straw was yellow to represent the stars that are on the flag.
Oh, cool.
And it didn't work out that way. We decided to go a little bit more of a vibrant approach because, you know, as flags go, they can be pretty not as vibrant, and also colors repeat a lot.
Yeah,
you know, you
exactly.
see a lot of blue, you see a lot of red, but that was actually my first go-to. I was like, oh, how cool would it be to represent the country flags?
And
while
then
also,
what were some of your other In the Heights designs?
my other in the Heights designs, my personal favorite is the Paciencia y Fe.
Uh-huh.
And that's the one with a dove.
That's the one that Lynn wore at the event that
That's
I
right,
hosted
he
a year
did.
ago today.
Yeah,
which I posted on my Instagram, that picture.
He must really like that one because I see him in that a lot on Twitter.
And he's also in that shirt on like news broadcasts. I feel like he
I
wears your
know.
designs in public.
I love
a
that he
lot.
wears. He's so casual. Like he'll wear the t-shirts, not just mine, but just he's the kind of guy that'll pick out a nice t-shirt or a blazer over it, and you're like, wow, that's fashion.
I know, totally.
He's so slick.
So another thing you have in common with Lynn is that you both are very active vocal supporters of the Hispanic Federation.
Yay.
And I'm really excited to, believe it or not, it's time to wrap the show up.
Oh, wow.
We
where did
have less
time
than
go?
10 minutes left. I
That's
know.
awesome.
And yesterday, I'm going to just embarrass Dom a little bit because he was like, I don't know how to be on the radio. I'm a behind the scenes guy. And I was like, dude, we're overdue for an hour-long catch-up anyway. We'll just let people listen in. If you don't have to try to be anything that you're not, you're a fascinating person with a really fascinating job in theater. And the message is, there are lots of ways to break into this business.
Oh, so
and
many.
I think the coolest way to do it is to figure out what your second biggest passion is, or your like a parallel passion, something like graphic design, for example, and then become an expert at that intersection. And you have done that in such a remarkable way, even if you didn't necessarily set out to do that. Like, I always tell people, you know, let's say somebody's passion was boxing, and they were like, I want to open a boxing gym. Well, there are a lot of boxing gyms out there, and how do you differentiate yourself? Well, what's their second biggest passion? What if their second biggest passion was like organic gardening, and they decided to, instead of having a big warehouse where people came and boxed in, you know, like a sort of traditional concrete and steel kind of place, what if it was like a greenhouse where people could meditate in beautiful lush greenery right after they finish sparring?
Right. That's reminding me of your interview with the trainer from Mark Fisher.
Oh yeah, with
Because it
Harold
was
Gibbons.
totally
Yeah.
that, how do I get people to think of fitness as fun
Totally.
and entertainment?
Oh, I love that you listened to that.
Oh yeah, I listened to it on the way to work this morning.
Amazing. Well, yeah, so I think that it's important that, especially in an era where performers are getting more and more visible through social media, and it's like, you know, I want to be part of that, but I can't necessarily sing or dance, or I haven't done the work it takes to get to a professional level yet. There are so many other inroads and so many other ways to be part of the family. Then I also explained, as I explained to you and I explained to all of my guests, I believe very firmly that there's no justification for having a public platform if you're not using it to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Our hero, Lin-Manuel Miranda, certainly does that on a very regular basis. He has used every opportunity to promote good works and to partner with organizations that do good works. And when I asked you what charity you'd like to promote today, you said the Hispanic Federation. What does it mean to you?
Well, there was a shirt I made for TeeRico, and all of the funds went to a scholarship for Latin American students. And that right off the bat, I think, is very important, because there may be somebody who will receive that scholarship and then be able to make something of themselves and pay that forward. I mean, like, going back to when I was watching In the Heights on the Tony Awards and felt so inspired by that, like imagining what something like a grant or a scholarship could do in order to advance somebody's education and career, and then maybe come around and make the next that thing that'll inspire another generation, I think would be so beautiful.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Hispanic Federation is America's premier Latino nonprofit membership organization, and the goal is to support Hispanic families and strengthen Latino institutions through work in the following areas: education, health, immigration, civic engagement, economic empowerment, and the environment. And the website is super easy. It's HispanicFederation.org. You might remember the Immigrants We Get the Job Done Coalition. That was their partnership with Lynn. They did a big fundraiser. I believe it was to attend one of the opening nights, maybe in D.C.
Oh, yeah, I remember
of
that.
Hamilton through Prizio. You can also support the Hispanic Federation through Amazon Smiles program. If you just go to smile.amazon.com and you buy your stuff on Amazon through that link instead of the traditional Amazon link, a portion of your proceeds will go to the charity of your choice. So you can choose Hispanic Federation for that. And I, Dom, in your honor, am going to make a donation to the Hispanic Federation today. And I'm going to ask everyone listening to consider doing the same thing. I understand that, you get hit up for money a lot. We all do. It's, whether it's all the candidates who are running to, to unseat our current quote unquote president, or whether it is from someone like me who has a paid subscription opportunity for this website. I'm only able to make, not this website, for this radio show, I'm only able to make Laura Heywood Interviews because of the few people who can afford to spend $6.95 a month to get every episode a week early. And a lot of people, actually, I'm hearing from, who have subscribed through dnrstudios.com/Laura, don't actually listen a week early. They just really believe in helping me make the show, which touches my heart so
That's
much.
beautiful.
Because if those people disappeared, the show goes with it. It also is very important to me that there be a free version. So I'm asking you for the $6.95 in that capacity if you can afford it. And I'm also saying, I'm leading by example in terms of every week I make a donation to the charity of choice of my guest. I tend to bring on guests who have similar ideologies as me, and I guess I suppose I always would have veto power if somebody wanted to. But generally, when something's a charity or a nonprofit, I'm going to be, I tend to have I tend to know at least the general direction my guests are going to go. So I'm making a donation to Hispanic Federation.
Thank you so much.
Every little bit